Welcome to Change It Up Radio here with Paula Shaw. First of all, I want to say to the live stream viewers, welcome and thank you for watching. We've got a great show today. My guest is Anthony McIntosh, who's the president and founder of SSE Advisors, which is a strategic business development consulting firm. And we are going to be talking about business grief. So thank you for joining us. And remember, live stream viewers, you're backstage with us. This recording will then go to my sound engineer, who will add the bumper music, the intros, the outros, the commercials, and all of that kind of thing. It's the way we have to do things these days, since we are all not as able as we used to be to march into the studio and do things the other way. So bear with us, and we hope you're going to enjoy this show. So right now, I am going to start as though I'm just starting the radio show. So thanks for being here. Welcome to Change It Up Radio here with Paula Shaw. I am so happy to have you here with me today. We have a wonderful show for you. We're calling Business Grief. And I'm sure a lot of you know exactly why we're going with a title like that today, because it's strange times these days, and businesses are up and down, and some of them are out. And it's a very, very difficult time for a lot of people. My guest today is an expert in helping business to be successful and to scale and to be sustainable. So we have lots to talk about. I'm sure he's a very busy man these days. His name is Anthony McIntosh, and he'll be joining us in just a little bit. So once again, welcome. Those of you who follow the show know that I am Paula Shaw. I am the author of Saying the Right Thing When You Don't Know What to Say, which comes in pretty handy for a lot of people, and Grief, When Will This Pain Ever End? And grief is a topic that is really near and dear to my heart, because many years ago, I realized that when change comes, and you know, this show is Change It Up Radio, and when change comes into people's lives, there has to be loss, because something has to be gone to make space for something new when the change comes. And that can create issues for people. That can create problems for people. And so in my work as an author, a speaker, and a life transitions coach, as well as this show, I'm always helping people deal with the discomfort of change. Even if it's a change you were looking forward to, we humans love the comfort of the familiar. And so when new things come along, it can be very, very difficult for us. And we're all dealing with a lot of new things right now, aren't we? Ever since the pandemic began, life has not been the same. A lot of change has been thrust upon us, and we don't always know what to do with that change. We don't always know how to handle it. Sometimes it makes us fearful. Sometimes it makes us anxious. Sometimes we find it exciting or even welcome, because perhaps the way things were is not the way we really wanted them to be in the first place. So change has many, many facets to it. And we feel here at Change It Up Radio that our job is either to spotlight change makers who are making the world a better place, or to bring you information to help make change smoother and more productive. And I think all of those things will be covered today with my guest, Anthony McIntosh, because he's dealing with businesses, and we all know business and the economy has been a huge concern during this pandemic. As well as wanting to stay healthy ourselves, we want our economy to stay healthy. And And that's been a bit on the line because we haven't known where things were going to go and how it was going to turn out during this pandemic. So I think it's very important that we keep in mind some of the important aspects of grief. And so let's look at, first of all, what is grief? Is it tears? Is it just sadness? Is it depression? Grief actually, in my opinion and in my experience, is this huge compendium of emotions. It isn't any one thing. Grief can show up with many faces. It can be sadness. It can be depression. It can be fear. It can be reclusiveness. It can be a lot of trepidation about what the future holds. Sometimes when something unexpected happens, like this pandemic, the grief shows up in that, oh my God, what's next? And people can become a little hypervigilant. They can become fearful about things that wouldn't have bothered them before. And so grief has many faces. I know that we've all heard of the stages, the 5 stages of grief. And sometimes those stages are applicable, but I don't like to confine grief to just 5 stages. Because as I said, in my 28 years of working with grieving people, I've seen it show up in many, many different ways. But one of the things I know is critical when you're grieving is you've got to feel the feelings. You've got to feel the feelings and allow yourself to express the feelings. Because stuffing them down or getting busy or trying to rationalize them away just doesn't work. Remember, we've all got an inner child and we've got an inner adolescent. And I was just saying to a client the other day who's trying to intellectualize her way out of her grief, I asked her, if you saw a crying child sitting on the curb, would you sit down and try to explain to it that this wasn't logical, or tell her she should be grateful for all the other things in her life? Would you rationalize that there's no purpose or good sense in crying? No, you'd probably embrace that child and try to soothe them and make them feel better. And we need to do that with ourselves as well. We need to be more gentle and giving with ourselves when we are grieving. And so whether you're grieving the loss of a person, the loss of a circumstance, the loss of a relationship, grief is grief, and we all feel it at 100%. And if we don't allow ourselves the truth of our grief, if we don't allow ourselves the honesty of accepting it and seeing it, acknowledging it, it has a very sneaky way of growing and becoming more problematic. So I encourage anybody, whether it's your business, whether it's your marriage, whether it's your health, whatever it might be, whatever loss is going on that might be causing you distress, sit down with somebody, whether it be a friend or a professional, sit down with somebody and talk about your grief. Cry your tears if you need to cry your tears. I was just yesterday with my sister and my mom and dad, and my sister has been in and out of hospitals for an entire year. She's had issues that they just can't seem to figure out. And at one point in time in our visit, she started to cry. And then she did what most of us do. She pulled back and she went, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just feel so awful. I'm just so tired of it all." And I looked at her and I said, "Why are you apologizing? Your life has sucked for the last year. You've been through something horrible. I don't know what I would have done. I don't know if I could have handled it. Go ahead and cry your tears. Go ahead and feel sad. You may have a really good reason to feel sad. And believe me, you won't be able to move on. So if all your friends and your family are saying, buck up, be strong, this will pass, you'll be okay. If they're all saying that and you haven't had a chance to really express the truth of your reality, then put their words aside. Because I promise you, you can't go forward in a positive way. You cannot go forward and become joyful and expressive and fully alive again until you've moved these feelings through. Emotion, energy in motion needs to be brought up, expressed, and moved out. Then you have an empty vessel into which you can try to create something new or something better. But until you do that, there is too much of this sad energy, this grieving energy. It's taking up too much room to allow something new to come in. So again, feel the feelings, express the feelings, go within. Give yourself time to really look at what you feel and what you need. Then decide on the new change, the new going forward look. And then course correct as you go, because it may not be perfect in the moment you first come up with the idea. I'm sure my guest in the next segment is going to be telling us a lot about what businesses need to do. They may have a strategy, but as you go, you have to keep checking it out. Is it working, or do we need to tweak it? Do we need to try something just a little bit different? So in the next segment, Anthony McIntosh will be joining me, so please stay with me. And by the way, don't forget, if you want to know more about Change It Up Radio or get information about being a guest or a sponsor of this show, go to changeitupradio.com. And if you want to know more about my work, or you want to book me to speak at your event, which will probably be online these days, you can go to paulashaw.com or Paula Shaw Speaks. All right, we'll be right back with Anthony McIntosh. Stay with us. All right, so Facebook live stream viewers, this is the part where we aren't really going anywhere, and I'm going to bring the show back as though you just heard the commercials and the music. Okay, here we go. Welcome to Change It Up Radio here with Paula Shaw. Delighted to have you here with me today. And in this segment, I am really excited to get to introduce you to Anthony McIntosh. So give me a moment to pull up the notes on Anthony so I can tell you just a little bit about him. First, I'll have to put my eyes on here. He is the president and founder of SSE Advisors, LLC, a strategic business advisory and consulting firm focused on developing strategies and plans that help clients build sustainable success. He has more than 25 years of experience in business leadership, strategic planning, and strategic development. And his consulting background combined with years working inside organizations gives him a unique perspective on addressing issues. He's worked with small, medium, and Fortune 500 companies. He has a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience that he's going to be sharing with us today. He was educated at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, and he has a master's degree in business management. And in economics. Oh my goodness, from Virginia Military Institute. Oh yes, he also did time in the armed services. So he's quite an amazing guy, and I am delighted right now to be able to introduce you to Anthony McIntosh. Please join me, Anthony. There you are.
Hello, Paula. How are you?
I am just fine, my friend. How are you?
I am excellent. I
Good.
am having a great day, and I think this is fun. We're about to have a
I'm
little.
having a little difficulty hearing you. Can you maybe move a little closer to your mic?
Is this better?
That is definitely better. Thank you.
Thank you.
All
So
right.
I
So,
do have a correction for you, Paula, as you did my bio.
oh, what was that?
That is, I never actually served in the armed services.
Oh, you didn't.
No, I went to Virginia military, but I never served. So just a
Ah,
point of correction.
all right. Thank you for correcting me. I made that up actually because I thought maybe I'd missed it in one of the other lines of your bio. So I
No,
stand corrected.
no, you're fine. As you was reading my bio, I was thinking, oh, that's too long. I hate hearing people talk about me. So I said I should have made it shorter.
Well, that's all right because you had a lot of interesting things to say. And I think it's important. I like to keep bios short, but it's important for people to understand where your expertise comes from in the things that we're talking about today. So I think it might be great to start with, tell us about SSE. What is it and how do you work with people?
So, as you said, SSC is a strategic business advisory and consulting firm.
Mm-hmm.
My primary focus is really on sustainable success, right? And the reason, and SSC, I've been doing this since 2016. And the main reason why I focus on sustainable success is because throughout my career, my experience, when I looked at different companies that I work with, small, medium, large companies, one thing that I always recognize the fact that people paid more attention to the metrics, right? And they paid attention to growth, they paid attention to revenue. However, those things come and go based upon controllable things and uncontrollable things. So when you start focusing a lot on metrics, you really lose focus on what is actual sustainable, right? So I've always looked to say, when people are growing, they don't pay that much attention to building sustainability into their model simply because things are going well.
Uh-huh.
When people are not growing as fast or going through some bad times, they also don't pay that much attention to sustainable success because
Trying
they're
to
focused
survive.
on short term, right? They're trying to do that survivability. So I really wanted to make sure that when I talk about sustainable success, that we make it, something tangible, right? I think you and I had a conversation briefly and we talked about the SSE, right? SSC is about sustainable success embodied. And I wanted to use that language because I wanted to help my clients help this become tangible, right? Help them to say, okay, this is something that I can grasp. So that is where and how SSC came about.
So I'm going to ask you for the secret sauce right up front. What is the most important thing to being sustainable?
I think there are one, I don't necessarily know if there's a secret sauce, but the things that I have found that makes it, one is leadership, right? And leadership is important because at the end of the day, that leader is going to drive the organization, and that leader is going to drive the organization to be more metric focused, or that leader is going to drive the organization to focus on not just the metrics, but what are the things that are helping us get to those metrics, right?
Yes.
So leadership is one thing, I think, and I think the other piece, as you start thinking about sustainable success, and I'll give you two words that I always think about when it comes to sustainable success, right? Relevant and evolve, right? So if you're thinking about sustainable success, you're thinking about how do I maintain or stay relevant as a business, but at the same time, you also have to think about evolving. And what does evolving look like? And this is why, I like the fact that when you look at your change it up, well, change has to deal with it, evolution and evolving, right? And those are things that I think are important. And as we go through the conversation, I think from a change it up perspective, to the point of one, you need to do it, right? Like you say, you need to do it. The other thing is you have to understand that there is a discomfort and it's going to be a challenge. It's not easy, but at the end of the day, right, these are things that have to come together, right? So, and this is why that point of leadership is extremely important, right? Because if you don't have a leader that will stick to it, then you're going to start and not continue and carry it through.
And you know, one of the things that I've seen about leadership is, especially with millennials, because, you know, we all know they're a little different breed. And a few weeks ago on my show, I had a woman who's a specialist with millennials. And it's very interesting because, you know, the old, in my day, and certainly in my parents' day, you went to work for the company store and you just did your job so you could put food on the table. And hopefully you liked the work you did. Millennials want meaning in their work, right? They want to feel that what they're doing matters to themselves, to the planet, to the people. And so if leadership isn't aware of that, I can see where a business could really struggle very quickly. Are you seeing that sort of thing out there?
Yeah, and I think to your point, this when you start thinking about business grief and you actually start having conversations about millennials, right, and the younger generation, there is a portion of the generation that all they have experienced is growth, right? Think about since the last recession, right?
Right.
This is and this is why it's important from a business perspective, right? So, you know, it's interesting when I think about why this is important, right? I just think about the different businesses that I have spoken to or the different businesses that are out there, right? So, take, for example, you've got the business that came up after the recession, right? So all they have known is growth.
Yes.
So this sense of loss is new to them, right?
That's really a good point.
Right. You've got that startup company that is struggling to continue and to survive just from being a startup. And now they're going through this type of change and this type of loss.
Yes.
Even my mature companies that we talk to, right? The companies that have been around, the companies that have seen the recession the last time, this is different, right? This is a different level of uncertainty, right? So there are things that are out there that are different. And back to the point, that younger generation, this is new, right? They've only been in, they've only understood or lived through a work environment that has been positive for at least the past 10 years. So I think that there are a lot of things that are coming together when you think about grief, right? And, you know, it's great talking about grief with an expert of grief, simply because I can always kick it back over to you if I don't feel like I know what I'm saying. The thing that's interesting about business grief is you talk about that individual and that individual going through grief. Think about a company, right? And that company has made up of many individuals, right? So when that company's going through grief, all of those individuals are going through grief. Yes. All of those individuals are experiencing, you know, different sets of emotions. You talk about the emotions that have to come through. All of that is going on throughout your organization. And I'll go back to, and this is where the leadership becomes extremely important, right? Because it helps guide people through this period of grief. And like I said, it just, I find it very interesting just when you have the conversation, because the business grief is almost natural when it comes to the cycle of business, right? Because it's about gains and losses. So it's almost natural. However, this is different.
Yes, it is very different. I mean, first of all, nobody on the planet has ever lived through a pandemic before. None of the people, none of the businesses. And so we are all sort of making it up as we go these days in so many places because we have no prior experience with this. So Anthony, we're going to have to take a little break right now, but when we come back, let's talk about this whole idea of grief and businesses a little more and really look at what's going on. So we will be right back. So, Anthony, if you're ready, I'll just bring it back and we will go. I've already explained to the live stream people that they're backstage with us here.
Okay, let's hit it.
All right, let's hit it. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio here with Paula Shaw. My guest today is Anthony McIntosh, who is the president and founder of SSE Advisors LLC, which is a business strategizing, development, and sustainability consulting firm. They do it all, and they've had their hands pretty full since this pandemic began because we're discussing business grief. And one of the things about grief that can be really difficult to deal with is when something comes out of the blue. You know, an accident happens, or somebody gets a cancer diagnosis, or something comes out of the blue that turns your world upside down. Those kinds of grief experiences can be even more difficult because there was no preparation, no time to get ready for the loss. Well, it seems to me, Anthony, that that's pretty much what happened to business in this country. One day we're in operation, the next day we are shut down because there is a pandemic. By the way, a word I don't think I'd ever heard in my lifetime prior to all of this beginning. So what did you see with businesses when that happened?
So this is interesting because as we talked about in the last segment, you know, businesses, it's a natural segment. It's natural. Grief is natural, right?
Right.
There's different cycles, but let's just talk about why this business grief is different, right? And I want to explain to, you know, and you were hitting on some of the points. So let's talk what happened, right? So COVID came, we hit a pandemic, and there was loss all over the place, right?
Amen.
There was loss as it relates to customers, loss as it relates to, you know, relationships. People lost business relationships, right? You
Absolutely.
had no access to customers.
And their identities, you know, and their identities in their business title.
Right. So all of these different things were coming into play, and to the point that you talk about, it's not just the business identity, it's this sense of normalcy, right?
Yes.
It was, you know, this is how the business operated. And now, overnight, you know, this thing about this, overnight, you know, companies had to shut down.
Yes.
Right. And what made it was this immediate impact, but it was an immediate impact. You know, during your natural cycle, your business may go up or down, but it's just your business and maybe your industry. This happened to everyone globally.
Yes. Cute.
So at the same time, you've got, not only is it your business, but it's all the other businesses that surround you. And you, to the point that you talked about, the entire economy saw this happen, right? So not only was this happening from a pandemic perspective, just the magnitude of how it is played out, you know, started coming to bear. But then on top of all of this, you made a point to it early in your earlier segment, there's still uncertainty out there, right? So it's not just about the grief that has happened, it's about the grief, the anticipatory grief, right? People are anticipating that pandemic is still out there, so we don't know what to do. Economic uncertainty still exists, right? Because I mean, no one knows what's going to happen.
Right.
But then you throw this social unrest on top of all of this going on, and that's a different story, but it impacts businesses, right? So think about you as a business, you've gone through this pandemic, you know, you're coming out of lockdown, you're about to reopen, you start reopening your business, and social unrest happened, and things are happening. So maybe you don't open up your shop if you're a downtown location for a while. Maybe you're putting, so all of these different things. So it's not just about what has happened to cause your loss, is what has happened to cause your loss may still be out there.
Absolutely. There are no absolutes these days, right? We don't know if it's over or if this is temporary and come the fall, we're back to shut down again. And I think, misinformation is one of the hardest things that people deal with when they're grieving. For example, a typical thing that people always say is grief just takes time. You just have to get busy. That is the biggest piece of misinformation possible, because sometimes if you don't do active things to help yourself heal, time will actually make your wounds worse.
Yes.
And just getting busy is a way of not acknowledging the feelings and not expressing the feelings, which I was saying earlier is incredibly important. So misinformation, I don't know about you, Anthony, but I feel like misinformation has been coming at us left and right since this pandemic began, partly because we didn't know a lot of things, but also because people are just putting out there their fears more than accurate scientific information.
Correct. And this is why, I always go back to that from a business perspective, always go back to that leadership, right? Because
Yes.
think about everything that you just said and the emotional connections, right? And from your earlier segment, from a business perspective, the first thing most businesses will do is try to intellectualize their way out of it, right? You talked about that earlier in your
Of
earlier segment.
course. Yeah.
And as a business, yeah, that's typically what businesses do, right? Because most businesses try to operate in a rational manner, right? Most, I've done it myself. I've said, okay, I think I can think my way out of this box.
Yeah.
Only to find out I'm in a circle. So
Right. Well said.
but I think it is truly important, especially like I said, that it's important from a business perspective, because you as the leader have your team, you have people, you have people getting information, to your point, misinformation, all this information is coming and being bombarded. So they're not only looking to you to help them and from a guiding the company perspective, right? But they're looking to you to say, hey, what do we do? How do we get through this? Yeah, we can talk about our culture, we can talk about our value, but hey, there's something going on here and I need more, right? As an employee,
Yes.
I need more, right? Because at home, I'm dealing with my personal losses, and now I'm coming to the office and I'm trying to understand where we are as an organization without having to think about or worry about it at the same magnitude that I'm doing on the personal side.
Mm-hmm. And I love it that you brought in the personal perspective, because early on in COVID, I had an ER nurse on my show that I interviewed. And one of the points that people, don't really think about is not only are these people putting their own health and their own lives on the line, many of them now were struggling to find childcare because
Yeah.
the schools closed. So their personal lives were in upheaval while they're trying to be able to go and serve the people who need them to try to stay alive. The personal thing is huge. And just to take a moment for a little laugh, I have to say one of my favorite photos from COVID, because, a lot of parents suddenly became teachers. And that was maybe the hardest job ever. And there was a photo of a typical mom's van, and on the side, painted on the window, it said, "You lied. My child is not a joy to have in class." I love that. But let's think about that, really. How many parents not only were trying to do their job at home, they're trying to do their job at home while their children are at home. And in the beginning, there was no online school. The schools were trying to figure it out. I mean, I can imagine that there were a lot of homes where it was total pandemonium. And these people are now expected to still be performing their jobs.
Yeah, no, I think it's important. And one thing that I've always said as this started happening, people have to understand the difference between working from home and having to work while home, right? Those are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, to your point, I think there's a higher appreciation of teachers nowadays.
Amen, brother. That's for sure. That is for sure on every level. But I think that that's a really good point. And for some people, the switch to working at home was a plus. It was kind of wonderful. And for others, it was a major problem. Major
Yeah.
problem.
And like I said, all of this ties into the grief that people are feeling from a business perspective, right?
Yes.
So think about it. If you're a business and you say, hey, we're going to work from home, just think about the pressure that you just put on that individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
That individual that has children under 5 years old, right? That are always needing attention, right? So
right.
when you think about it, yes, you may have relieved something from a business perspective. However, have you increased grief on your employees or on your team, right? So
yes.
There's an element, and that's why I say that the business piece is a significant element, because it touches every aspect of our life.
It really does. It really does. And we're going to have to go to a break here in a minute. But when we come back, let's explore this a little further. And I'd love to hear how you've been advising your clients during this time. All right, we will be right back. All right, sir, if you're ready, I'm going to just take a quick sip of water here.
I will do the same.
And by the way, Anthony, was there anything you wanted to cover that we haven't hit on yet?
No, we're fine.
Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about SSE. I forgot to reset. Here we go. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio, here with Paula Shaw. My guest today is Anthony McIntosh. He is the president and founder of SSE Advisors, LLC. And that is a business and strategic planning consulting firm that helps keep businesses successful and sustainable, which is pretty huge in this time that we're living in right now. So, Anthony, we talked a bit about what a shock COVID was, how it turned the whole world upside down. But for businesses, it was like a death that came out of the blue overnight. You know, it just happened, and now they're trying to figure out how to deal with it. So what are some of the important things you found that you've been able to share with your clients that have helped them coping with all this craziness that's going on?
Yeah, so the thing that I have found, and when you start thinking about, grief, right? The first thing that I tell people, one is, similar to on a personal side, the businesses, you have to understand who you are as a business and where you are as it relates to your business, right? So this is where, we look at the 5 stages, right? And understanding just, and the names of the stages could be whatever, but, think about denial, right? So that denial happened when everything shut down, right? And businesses went through, I can't believe this is happening, right?
Right.
And they went through this, okay, this may be a short-term type of deal, right? So when they're in that phase, right, you really want them to take a step back and say, okay, this actually did happen.
And you're gonna have to deal.
but the thing that I try to tell people is, don't think about it from a COVID perspective. Think about it from uncertainty and disruption, right? Because you will always have uncertainty and disruption, right?
Good point.
So
good point.
Whether or not you deny COVID or deny what's happening, you have to understand that you can't deny that everything is being disrupted and there's a level of uncertainty in it, right?
Yes.
I'll walk through the stages because this is how you understanding where you are, right? And like I said, these are not linear. These are just things that people experience that you have to go through that emotional, right? And you found that when I talk to different people and where there's the anger, right? And where was this anger coming from, right? And when you look at this, conversations were more around, why me, right? And even when companies had to shut down, just determining you're essential versus non-essential, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who owns a business think their business is essential. It's essential to them, right? So helping
Right.
people, you have to think through how are people emotionally getting through what their business looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I found interesting is the bargaining phase, right? And the bargaining phase, based upon my experience and what I've seen, is the bargaining phase really started. I started seeing it when you started hearing a lot about these government activities, right? And the government, the CARE Act, and some of these, and PPP, and
Right.
people started saying, okay, yes, it's going to get better, right? They started rationalizing that, okay, things are going to get better because the government is going to help us get out of this, right?
Yes.
So, and the reason I say that sort of was like the bargaining phase, right? Because that was a short-term solution, right? These are short-term solutions that are being put in place. And you can see it happening now because the people who went through that, and some of them are going to sort of like this depressed state, right? And they're going through this depressed state because they're beginning to recognize that, oh, I got 8 weeks, but what happens after the 8 weeks?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
now you're trying to figure out what happens after the 8 weeks. And on top of that, you've got this, I'll say you have these dual government programs going from a PPP and extended unemployment. And you've heard the stories of people want to stay on unemployment because they're getting this extra $600. So therefore, I'm better off. So all of these experiences are happening from the business side. And then the thing that when I talk to different people and I say, look, you have to understand where you are as a business, right? You
Right.
have to understand how all of these things are coming into play, because that last element is around acceptance, right? And when you get to the acceptance piece, now you're ready for change, right? And the thing that I tell my people when I'm working with them, especially when you get the different loans or you got the different programs,
Mm-hmm.
think about how to leverage those programs to look forward, right? So some of the organizations that I've talked to, they knew that they had to bring their employees back, right? They knew they had to bring their employees back for this period of time. However, they did not think about bringing those employees back to do what they were doing before COVID,
Right.
right?
Right.
They thought about bring these employees back. And now, how do I use these employees to think about how do I move forward, right? And how do I start pivoting, or how do I change it up, right?
Exactly.
Because that's what's important, right? So when I think about sustainable success, my first thing is understand where you are, right? Because you have to know where your business is in order to start moving it from that spot, right?
Good
From that
point.
place.
Right.
So really, I went through that just to help people say, okay, how do I understand where I am? Because at the end of the day, it's going to come back understanding where you are. It's going to come back to the leadership piece, right? Because that leadership is
Mm-hmm.
going to be very valuable in terms of what and how you communicate to the team. And then the last thing is I talk to them, like, don't lose sight of the long game, right? Because a lot of these things are happening, and uncertainty, is happening all now, and everything that you're getting funding, and there's a lot of short-term thinking that's going on right now, but
Yeah.
don't forget that this is a long game, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
always tell people, I always focus on sustainable success. Metrics are important, but there are other elements that you have to make sure you put in place to make sure that you're going to be around tomorrow. But more
Right.
importantly, you give your organization and your team a level of, we know where we're going.
That's so important. And two words that come to me that I have both seen and that I've been impressed by are creativity and flexibility, that a lot of businesses have shown. Being able to, like, for example, a lot of people who did speaking engagements and
Yeah.
that kind of thing, spoke mostly at conferences. That's pretty gone for a while now. But some of them have reinvented themselves on Zoom
Yeah.
and figured out ways to take what they do online. And so that creativity and flexibility, I mean, out of 2008, that recession came Google and Uber and, you know, some of the amazing businesses that are really successful now because of creativity, you
Yeah,
know?
it's important. I mean, as you think about where you need to go and you understand that you're not going to be the same business you were before COVID,
Yeah.
right? Creativity and flexibility, those things have to be part of your model moving forward.
I agree. And you know, I keep hearing people say, Anthony, I just want things to get back to normal. I want things to be the way they were before. I personally don't think we're gonna have things be the way they were before. What do you think?
There, no, things are not going to be the way they were before. Just from a standpoint, everything that's happened is just an acceleration of where we probably actually were going anyway, right?
Yes.
So, you know, the world of virtual, yeah, we were going there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
This has just sped it up, right? So
Yeah.
this is where your creativity and flexibility comes into play, right? Because now things are, you know, they may have been a year or two or a couple years down the road, but now they're here and we're
Yeah.
having to deal with them, right? So just think about the acceleration of some of these things that, yeah, I knew Zoom was out there and I would do it here and there, but it's now part of my everyday.
Amen. Me too. It's so true. And the other word that comes to mind that I'd love to just close with, resiliency. That's been important, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been, right? Because I think that as a business, you need to be resilient anyway,
Hmm.
right? You need to be able to, uh, you know, survive the ups and downs, right? The gains
Yes.
and the losses, right? So that's part of, you know, how do you address grief, right? There's a resilience to what you need to do and how do
Exactly.
you address it, right? And that gets back into, you always, at the end of the day, how do you remain relevant and evolve?
Yes. So, Anthony, how would people reach you if they'd like to know more about your work or they'd like to actually have a conversation with you to deal with their business?
So you couple of ways. One is you can visit my site. It is www.sseadvisors.com. You can email me at anthony@sseadvisors.com. And again, www.sseadvisors.com or anthony@sseadvisors.com. Those are going to be the quickest way to understand what I'm about and how to reach me.
Perfect. And I am so delighted we had this time today. I can tell all of you, this is a really good guy. I think he's one of the great humans on the planet. And if you're considering talking to somebody about your business, or it's in trouble, or you're in the midst of business grief, this is your guy. And I want to remind everybody that we will air Sunday on AM 1170 and 96.1 FM in San Diego. We are on every major podcast platform, including iHeart and Blog Talk Radio. And now we are on a new platform that is really cool, and you've got to check it out. It's called Podopolo. That's Podolopo or something like that, Podopolo. And it's got gaming involved and rewards and all kinds of cool things you can do. So check us out also on Podopolo. Thank you all for being with us. I look forward to seeing you next week when my guest will be Marilyn King, who is a two-time Olympian pentathlon winner. And she's got some great wisdom to share with us. Anthony, thank you again. It was a delight spending this time with you.
Thank you, Paula. I appreciate it.
All right. See y'all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.